Hi, I'm Carol Andrews for another episode of Southwest TV News. Here's some of the stories coming up on today's show. The city detachment of the RCMP in Swift Current is seeing an increased volume of provincial prisoners and therefore spurring the need to increase costs for housing these individuals. The town of Maple Creek was one of hundreds of Canadian communities competing in the 2013 National Communities in Bloom contest. Months of set design and on-location shooting in and around Swift Current culminated on Halloween with the premiere of Swift Nightmares. Thanks for joining us here today. The city of Swift Current is increasing its fees to house prisoners at the local cell block. We have more in today's top story. The city detachment of the RCMP in Swift Current is seeing an increased volume of provincial prisoners and therefore spurring the need to increase costs for housing these individuals. According to the city's chief financial officer, Swift Current prisoners in cells are the responsibility of the municipality. However, prisoners from outside of Swift Current fall under the umbrella of the province, as do the costs incurred to provide temporary accommodations in the cell block. And now these fees to the province will increase.
In the past, the agreement was at a much smaller amount, and in the determination, 86% of the prisoners now are non-city prisoners, and therefore in the new agreement, the RCMP will pay us a much higher amount, $127,000 a year instead of the $40,000.
The new 5-year agreement between the City of Swift Current and the RCMP will be retroactive to January 1, 2012, and be in effect through December 31, 2016. The additional funds will be used for general policing and costs of operation of the local cell block at the Swift Current City RCMP detachment. The town of Maple Creek received accolades at the National Communities in Bloom competition. We have all the details in this report. The town of Maple Creek was one of hundreds of Canadian communities competing in the 2013 National Communities in Bloom contest. Each community was judged on a range of criteria, from overall tidiness, environmental practices, to heritage conservation. And as the winners were recently announced at the National Symposium and Award Ceremony at Canada's Capital Region, the town of Maple Creek was recognized with 4 out of 5 blooms in its respective category, an accomplishment which has town officials beaming with pride.
Well, I think the two things that we took away from this national competition as a community is, what we can accomplish by working collaboratively as a community and working towards making the community a more attractive and welcoming place to be. And then also, going into the national competition, I think there was some trepidation. There was, concern that, it's just us in Maple Creek, and can we really stack up against other communities across the country? And what we've learned through this process is most definitely, we scored as well as the rest of the communities across the country in our size category. And so what that tells us is that Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, can hold its own against other communities of our size across the country.
And as far as moving on to the international portion of the contest with the awarding of 4 out of 5 possible blooms, Petty John states this is not a likely path the town will take.
Well, the way the national competition worked is that you were required to have a minimum of 4 blooms, and you had to be invited to participate at the national level. And so, although we haven't explored what participating at the international level would involve, I would anticipate it would involve us having to have 5 blooms and an invitation to compete. So I don't really see that happening. And the community, I think, also is going to be going back to just participating at the provincial level. The program really isn't about competing against other communities, but rather, helping communities look at their own towns and how they can make them more sustainable and better places to live. So they're really a good way of structuring community development activity.
Further details on the Communities in Bloom contest are available online. W.W. Smith Insurance has reached a milestone as it celebrates its centennial. Having served Southwest Saskatchewan for the past 100 years, W.W. Smith Insurance is your motor license issuer, while specializing in all of your personal and commercial needs, including home, auto, agro, business, and life insurance. W.W. Smith Insurance, independently owned and operated since 1913. A second in a series of locally produced films premiered in Swift Current, with all proceeds going towards the local SPCA. Months of set design and on-location shooting in and around Swift Current culminated on Halloween with the premiere of Swift Nightmares. The film trilogy is the second in a series of films produced by Dead Prairies Productions. Devin Oman is one of the producers and writers of this year's trilogy, which surrounds the themes of vampires, clowns, and ghosts, and was pleased with the overall outcome of the group's second film production.
It's a challenge, but at the same time, the community is really great to us. We're premiering at the Living Skies Casino, and all the proceeds go to the SPCA. We raised over $4,000 for Zombageddon last year, so we're hoping to make around that same amount or more.
Reuben Parker, who starred in last year's Zombageddon film, returned to the production crew this year, taking on several roles as actor, writer, and editor, and was excited about writing the script for The Shadowing after gaining inspiration from last year's film.
When I was working on Zombageddon, one of the makeup artists had been working on me, and she'd say, you have really, really high cheekbones. Like maybe they'll write a vampire film for the next one. I'm like, well, it got to the point where we were talking about writing. I'm just like, well, maybe a vampire story wouldn't be the worst. So I just started breaking it down. I actually watched a couple of films that were not horror related at all, but planted a couple of seeds, and a couple of weird dreams later, you wake up and all of a sudden there's an idea in the head, and you just think, well, if I sew this into a bit of that and try and run with it. And actually the writing is probably the fastest part of the whole process. I found I wrote the script for Shadowing in possibly a couple of nights at most.
And now with the second film on the books for Dead Prairies Productions, the group is already looking ahead to their next project. Efforts which come to light through community support and the dedication of the volunteer cast and crew.
Well, I'm hoping they're going to realise, that everybody involved has put a huge amount of effort. A hell of a lot of people have sacrificed their time, with no pay. And that the reason they've done that, one, is so that, that we have these kind of creative outlets in Swift Current. We perhaps have to work a little bit harder in a smaller place like this, but, there's also people who really have a lot to offer in terms of creativity.
Action! A final tally from the admission and concession revenue at the premiere of Swift Nightmares is yet to be revealed. However, all proceeds will be donated to the Swift Current SPCA.
It'll help, as the Premier said, with the short-term issues around the stimulus, but it's got a clear eye on the future, something for the long-term economic health of this region.
Well, this brings to a close another episode of Southwest TV News, reporting the stories that matter to you. We always welcome your news tips. You can always reach us here by phone at our studio or by email to contact us at southwesttvnews.com. Also, be sure to join us daily online for the latest news from across Southwest Saskatchewan and so much more at mylocaltv.ca. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm Carol Andrews.